Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Footy with Fletch podcast. Today in episode 17, we get to talk to Campbell Brown, who played 205 AFL games, 159 with the Hawks and 46 games with the Suns. He was a 2008 Hawthorn Premiership player and he kicked 109 goals. Campbell Brown joins us now. Hello, Campbell.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks very much for the invite.
It is great to have you. So, of course, you were a part of the 2001 Super Draft, which includes some of the superstars of the game, including Luke Hodge, Luke Ball, Chris Judd, Jimmy Bartell, and many more superstar players. What was it like to be drafted with such a great group of players?
It certainly, looking back at it, it was a freakish year for the draft. Gary Ablett Jr. was in there. Dane Swan was a late pick, and he went on to win a Brownlow medal. Brian Lake, David Hale, Nick Del Santo, Lee Montagna. It goes on and on and on. So when you're just a young kid getting drafted and you haven't made a name for yourself yet, we were just sort of names and numbers. But looking back at the draft, obviously Hawthorn did extremely well, getting Sam Mitchell at pick 36, Rick Ladson, Luke Hodge, obviously, with the number one draft pick, and Geelong, they had James Kelly, Jimmy Bartell, Gary Ablett Jr., and Stevie J, along with Gardner as well. Dynasties were made in that draft.
They definitely were some superstar players. What was it like to be drafted alongside guys like Sam Mitchell and Luke Hodge, like you mentioned?
Oh, it was fantastic. I didn't know a lot about those guys. Luke Hodge was a country boy from Geelong. He got to the club with osteitis pubis, so he sort of had to get managed through the pre-season. So I didn't get too many sessions with him. And Sam Mitchell was 19 when he got picked up. He got overlooked in the 2000 draft. He sent his video to every club in the competition. Most of those clubs didn't even respond to him, and Hawthorn saw his tape, invited him down to Box Hill. He played VFL for 2001 and had a really good year, and they decided to use one of their second-round picks on him. So I didn't know him. Rick Ladson was a Bendigo boy. I didn't really know him either. So I lived in Hawthorn. I grew up in Hawthorn, so getting drafted to Hawthorn was just down the road for me. It was a fantastic footy club. I bagged for Richmond as a kid, but getting drafted to Hawthorn was a dream come true for me. So, it was a learning curve, and we gradually, built a rapport and got to work, and eventually had some good success.
Yeah, you were, of course, a part of the 2008 grand final, which resulted in you being a premiership player. Can you put what that moment was like into words?
It was the highlight of my football career. As a kid, you dream. I went to every single grand final from 1992 to about 2004, I think. Even as a player, I went to a few as a player. And you'd go there the last day of September, 100,000 people. That's what you dreamed about. I never really thought it would come into fruition. But in 2008, we got that opportunity against Geelong, and, it was my only grand final. I certainly went into that game wanting to play as well as I possibly could and try and win it, because you're never too sure if you'll get the chance again. And myself and a majority of that side, we never did. We weren't part of, the next bit of Hawthorn's success in 2013, 14 and 15. So it was great to go in there as underdogs, as a young side that was pretty confident. We were bullish that we could beat the Cats, and we did that.
Yeah, definitely must be a great thrill. So, of course, during your career at Hawthorn, you got to play alongside some superstars at the Hawthorn Football Club, including Lance Franklin, Jared Roughhead, Shane Crawford, Jordan Lewis, Brad Sewell, Cyril Rioli, Sam Mitchell, and Luke Hodge. What was it like to play with such a great list of players?
Yeah, when you say those names, it's a pretty great team, isn't it? We're pretty fortunate. Lance Franklin was just a freak from day one, and I think he'll be the last player that ever kicks 100 goals. And the fact he's still going now, 950 goals in, is superb. Shane Crawford is a great mate of mine, and for him to get a premiership in his last ever game was really special because he carried that footy club for so many years. Cyril's a freak, retired far too young, but what a journey he had, and those other guys you mentioned just worked hard. Were very tough, skillful, and disciplined footballers.
Yeah, they definitely are some really fantastic footballers, and you definitely were lucky to play alongside them. You were involved in a very famous moment in 2009 against the Bombers. So after a hit on Brad Sewell from Matthew Lloyd, you called Matthew Lloyd a sniper. Can you give us a little bit of context surrounding that infamous moment in your career?
Yeah, we certainly had a few run-ins, the Hawks and Essendon and me and Matty Lloyd. Round 22, 8th versus 9th, and the winner on that Saturday afternoon went on to play finals. So there was a fair bit at stake between two great clubs, and we went in at halftime leading by about 4 goals, and we were quite dominant. Brad Sewell was the best player on the ground at the time, and we came back out after halftime, and Matty Lloyd didn't start nice and deep in the goal square like he usually did at full 40. He started just on the back of the square. Ball was bounced. He came charging in, and we know what happened next. So it certainly sparked the game and the rivalry back up. Essendon went on to win that game. I think Michael Hurley kicked 5 second-half goals and was instrumental. And we're pretty heated. After the game, I did an interview, and I called Matty Lloyd a sniper, and they weren't overly happy with it. I think he ended up getting 7 weeks suspension, and he retired. And Brad Sewell had 2 broken eye sockets, or bones in his face. So, yeah, it was explosive. It certainly became part of footy folklore, didn't it? That with the line in the sand game and a couple of other great contests against Essendon, brought that rivalry that they had in the 80s back to life.
Yeah, it definitely is a great rivalry. So, of course, your father, Mel Brown, was an AFL player with the Richmond Tigers. He was also inducted into the West Australian Football League Hall of Fame. He was never afraid of being physical throughout his career. Do you think this is where you got your physical flair, Campbell?
Good question. Yeah, probably. You're a bit of a product of your environment, aren't you? And he never had to encourage me to sort of be aggressive on the footy field. I quite enjoyed it, but the other part of that was I knew that I wasn't the most skillful player out on the footy field, so I had to bring a level of intensity and ferocity that maybe others didn't. For me, just to simply get a game each week. I was pretty fortunate that in the team that we had a lot of skillful guys, and Clarko really loved players that played right on the edge, and I put my hand up and admit I went over the edge on more than one occasion. But Clarko sort of he liked us playing that way. We sort of coined the phrase unsociable football, and that's what took us from a mediocre team to a premiership winning team. So the old man, he played a tough brand of footy. It was a different era, though. In the 60s and 70s, you could sort of get away with it a little bit more. But, yeah, that's just what I brought to the table to make sure that I got a game each week. And while there was plenty of suspensions, I think that the good by far outweighed the bad.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that the good did outweigh the bad. So, of course, you mentioned Alistair Clarkson. You had the absolute privilege to be coached by him probably one of the greatest AFL coaches of all time. What was it like to be coached by Clarko?
It was magnificent. I mean, he's the best coach I've ever had. His attention to detail was second to none. He was great with his personable skills. He had a unique ability to know how to get the very best out of individual players and the team collectively. He was fiercely loyal to his playing group and just a great leader. And a lot of the things that he taught us at the footy club, you sort of take now as a father myself, and having retired and left AFL footy, you take into your day-to-day life, about discipline and what you instill into your children. So he's more than just a coach. He's a real father figure to a lot of us. And I suppose we're very fortunate that Hawthorn made the courageous decision to employ him when they did in sort of late 2004, because on the back of what he brought to the table, along with everyone else involved in the Hawthorn Footy Club, it's been a remarkable era.
Yeah, he definitely is a phenomenal coach. So in 2009, you were involved where you were allegedly put up for trade after it was alleged that the Hawks were chasing Port Adelaide star Sean Burgoyne. And Mark Williams was in San Francisco at the time, and you were called by Mark Williams. What was going on through your head during this time?
It all came out of left field a little bit. I knew that the Hawks were very keen to get Sean Burgoyne to the footy club. Clarko had obviously coached him with his stint in Port Adelaide and knew what a great player he was, and he's still playing today. So what a trade it was. They threw a few sort of names up. I think initially that Port Adelaide wanted a direct trade with Brian Shoemakers being a South Australia boy, and Hawthorn didn't want to give him up. Then I think the name Jordan Lewis got thrown up, and obviously the Hawks weren't overly keen to get rid of him. He was still, pretty young and an up-and-coming star, and they couldn't come to an agreement. And then at some stage on about day 3 or 4, my name got thrown up, and I think Hawthorn sort of entertained the idea. It gathered wind a little bit, and next minute I was getting texts from sort of Chad Corns and Dom Cassisi and Dean Brogan and some of the players, and then Jocko Williams called me from over in San Francisco, sort of giving their spiel as to how and why I would be a good fit for Port Adelaide. But I mean, I had a year to run on my contract. We'd only won a flag the year before. I hadn't had my best season, but I certainly didn't play that poorly. I played 21 of 22 games, and still thought I had a lot to contribute to the Hawks. So I wasn't shocked. I wasn't surprised. It's just sort of the way that footy is, and I politely declined the offer from Port Adelaide, and we eventually got Sean Burgoyne anyway, and the rest was history. But it probably opened my eyes up to a little bit of how brutal the game is. And when the Gold Coast Suns approached me the year after, I seriously weighed up whether I should take the deal or not, and eventually did.
So, yeah, of course, you did take the deal at the Gold Coast Suns. What was the culture difference of such a successful club in Hawthorn and starting out at the Gold Coast Suns, an inaugural AFL team?
It was completely different. Obviously, you've got years of history with Hawthorn and an established playing list, coach and club, and then the Gold Coast, it was a blank canvas. We hadn't played a game of AFL footy yet. We had a new coach, new structure, new system, bunch of young guys, some really good young talent there. So we had to just try and create our own culture and history, and that was easier said than done. It was pretty difficult in those early days. We felt like we started to get a bit of momentum in our third year, and took that into 2014. The boys did early, and then Gary Ablett famously hurt his shoulder, and they missed the finals, and it sort of probably went all downhill from there. The club lost a lot of their star players in the years after, and sort of had to be a bit of a rebuild for the Gold Coast, but they're on the right track now, and it's just they've just got a long way to go. But I think Stewie Jew, who was a teammate of mine in 2008, Mark Evans, who was at Hawthorn through that period too, they're up there and they're very good operators, so they know what they're doing, and it's good to see the Suns have a little bit of stability and are playing up to their ability now.
It will be great to see how the Gold Coast Suns go in the next few years. So, of course, you are a VFL commentator with Channel 7. I'm also a VFL commentator with 94.1 FM 3WBC. What are your thoughts about the upcoming VFL season?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I wasn't sure if it was going to go ahead or in what fashion, but we're going to be broadcasting on Sunday afternoons from 12 till 2 with Nigel Carmody and Jason Bennett on Channel 7. And it's going to be a different format. The last game we did was the 2019 grand final between Williamstown and Richmond. That seems an eternity ago, obviously with last year getting wiped out. So it's different with, the NEFL teams joining, but I think that it's going to be fun. It's going to be very, very competitive this year, and hopefully it gives blokes an opportunity to play good footy and put their hands up and get drafted, because that's one of the best things I like seeing about that. Not only is it great to see, VFL footy played at Williamstown and Port Melbourne, some of those great historical clubs, but Brodie Mychek and Nick Hind and Luke Ryan and Lockie Schultz and, all those players that I've sort of seen go through the ranks, Anthony McDonald, Tipper Woody as VFL players, get their opportunity as AFL players and go on and be, genuine stars of the competitions that I get a real buzz out of.
It definitely is a great competition, and it will be very interesting to see how the new look competition will go in season 2021. What are your thoughts on the stand rule in the AFL?
I've got to admit that I probably was a bit of a critic at the start of the season. I thought that we were going to see, abundance of 50-metre penalties from players that are just second nature is to move. But to the players' credit, they've adapted to the rule change really quickly. To the AFL's credit, they identified that was one of the key rules that was preventing quick ball movement and scoring. And what we've seen in the first month of AFL has been nothing short of magnificent. We've had close games, competitions as equal as it could ever be. Steve Hocking and the AFL need to be applauded for coming up with the rule and implementing it. And I must admit, I'm happy to put my hand up and say I was wrong. It's been one of the major reasons why we're seeing such fantastic football.
Yeah, it definitely was an interesting rule decision, but I think it has had a great influence on the AFL. If you could pick any 5 players to have in a team of your choice from any team across the AFL's current players, who would you choose, Brownie?
Oh, great question. Current or past, or it doesn't matter?
It can be current.
Current, okay. I'd love to have Jack Steele. I think he's an absolute warrior. Probably Nick Nat, because you need a good ruckman, and he's probably the premier ruckman in the competition. Harris Andrews down back, I think he's a star. Up forward, that's a hard one. There's probably Josh. No, Buddy. I'd still go with Buddy. He's got a bit of run left in his legs yet. Joel Selwood, obviously, and that's 4. I will probably go with. I love Anthony McDonald, Tipper Woody. He's a real favourite of mine. So there's 5.
They definitely are some great players, and we're so lucky to have so many great players in the AFL. So you mentioned earlier on in the podcast that you supported the Richmond Football Club in your junior days. Who would have been your biggest hero and your biggest idol growing up?
I absolutely loved Matty Knights when I was a young kid growing up. Tony Free was another one who captained the club in the 90s. And then to have got the opportunity to sort of watch Richo play as a kid and then play against him, and then be able to work with him at Channel 7 over the last few years has just been a real highlight. He's just he was a great player, and he's an even better bloke.
Yeah, Richo definitely is a great person within the football industry. How do you sort of escape the football bubble? How do you find time to get away from the pressure of football during your playing days?
I always found it pretty easy sort of to flick the switch. So pretty relaxed. I loved sort of horse racing, music, things like that when I was playing. And then once you sort of got to the club to start training, bang, you could flick the switch and be switched on and lift your intensity. The same with game day, nice and relaxed leading up to a game. But then as soon as you went out there for your last warm-up, you're ready to go. So I found having another interest in horse racing, which is a passion that I still pursue today, and do a bit of work in the racing industry was always good to keep the mind just away from being football all the time.
Yeah, definitely. It's great to see that you do, of course, have the role with SEN Track. So you have had a really interesting AFL career. Do you regret any of your actions over your journey?
Oh, no, I don't. Sort of, you learn from your mistakes, and that's sort of what makes you the person you are today. So I'm not a big one to sort of live with much regret. I suppose if I got rubbed out and missed a grand final or an opportunity like that, you definitely regret it. But as I mentioned before, there's you get reported a few times. It was just one of those things, and you try and learn from it. I was a slow learner, but I don't regret any of my actions.
You definitely did have a great AFL career. Would have there been any funny moments in the change rooms post-match that stand out for you during your career, Brownie?
Oh, there's always a lot of fun to be had in the change rooms once the cameras stopped rolling. Grant Birchall and Brent Quare were really funny guys, and we're always up for a bit of a laugh. Even Clarko loves a good time. Footy trips were great fun. It's one of the great things about playing football with the footy trips overseas with the boys. We certainly made sure we had as much fun as we possibly could.
Yeah, so some of your footy trips must have been a great experience for you as well. You also, of course, had the opportunity to play against some superstars in the AFL during your career. Who would have been some of the greatest superstars that you think you would have played against during your career?
Oh, mate, probably the best player I've ever played with and against for that matter, was Gary Ablett Jr. What he did at Geelong was great, but I think what he did at the Gold Coast in his first 4 years was unheard of. He won the first 4 BNFs. He won a Brownlow. He would have won another Brownlow, his third, had he not injured his shoulder. And he was just a freak. He'd regularly get 30-plus possessions, kick 3 or 4 goals, and single-handedly sort of keep the Suns competitive or win them the game. So seeing that up close and personal was pretty special. And obviously Buddy, the year he kicked 100, he was kicking bags for fun, 6, 7, 10 against Essendon, which was great. And to be out there the night he kicked his 100th was great.
Yeah, they definitely are two of the greatest AFL players of all time. What was it like to sort of get to train alongside Lance Buddy Franklin at the Hawks?
Well, he loves to train. He trains pretty hard. He was a great athlete who was it was rare to see a big guy his size, 6'6", have such a great blend of speed and endurance. He would regularly win the 150 sort of repetitive speed tests, and he'd be right up there in the 2K time trial. Plus, over 20, he was lightning quick. So having been a defender through that sort of early stage, I played on him in intra-clubs and at practice on one-on-ones, and he's a hard man to contain.
He definitely is one of the greatest players in the AFL. Of course, he did kick 13 goals in his career. And of course, he kicked his 950th goal on the weekend against Essendon. Do you see him going on and joining the players that have kicked 1,000 goals, Brownie?
I do. I hope he does. If his body holds up, you still see that he's got a lot of good footy left in him. They might just need to manage him through, this year and next year. And if they do that, he'll definitely kick 50 more goals. The injury will be the only thing that stops him. But I think for football, for the Swans, and for everyone involved, it'd be fitting if he could kick over 1,000 goals and be up there with the absolute. He's one of the best anyway, but that's a big milestone.
He definitely is one of the greatest of all times. Thank you very much, Campbell Brown, for joining me today on the Footy with Fletch podcast. It was great talking to you.
No, thanks for having me, Fletch. You're a star, mate, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Bye for now. Thank you to everyone for listening to this episode of the Footy with Fletch podcast. It was great to interview Campbell Brown, so thank you very much, Campbell. And I'll be back with more of the Footy with Fletch podcast very soon. Bye for now.